Maya Rodriguez pressed her back against the cold concrete wall backstage, trying to make herself as small as possible. The worn guitar case sat at her feet, and every few seconds she'd glance down at it like it might suddenly vanish. That would solve everything, wouldn't it? No guitar, no performance, no reason to go through with this nightmare. She could hear the muffled sounds of the current act on stage. Some kid was doing a magic trick, and the audience was clapping politely. Maya's stomach churned. In about 10 minutes, that would be her out there. Her hands were already sweating, and she hadn't even opened the guitar case yet. "You're up after the next act," a volunteer with a clipboard said, walking past her. The woman didn't even look up, just kept moving down the hallway. Maya nodded at no one in particular. This whole thing was Mr. Chen's fault. Well, not really fault. Her music teacher meant well. He always meant well. For the past 3 years, since she'd started taking his after-school music class, he'd been telling her the same thing over and over. "You have something special, Maya. People need to hear you play." But Maya didn't feel special. She felt like a 17-year-old girl who was pretty decent at guitar and happened to have a music teacher who believed in her maybe a little too much. There was a difference between playing in the tiny practice room at school and standing on a stage in front of actual people who would judge every note, every mistake, every moment. She'd tried to back out. 3 times, actually. The first time was 2 weeks ago when she'd marched into Mr. Chen's classroom ready to tell him she couldn't do it. He'd looked at her with those kind eyes and said, "Just think about it for a few more days." The second time was last week when she'd texted him saying she had too much homework. He'd replied with a simple message that her performance slot was still saved. The third time was yesterday, when she'd convinced herself she was coming down with the flu. Her mother had taken one look at her and said, "You're nervous, mija. That's normal. You'll be fine." But standing here now, in this dimly lit backstage area of the community center, Maya didn't feel fine. She felt like her heart was trying to escape through her ribcage. The community talent showcase wasn't even a big deal. It happened every year, and usually it was just families and friends who showed up. Local kids doing dance routines they'd learned from YouTube, people singing karaoke-style covers, maybe someone reciting a poem. Nothing fancy, nothing that should make her this terrified. Maya bent down and unzipped her guitar case. The instrument inside had been her grandmother's. Abuela Rosa had given it to her 5 years ago, just months before she'd passed away. It wasn't expensive or fancy. The wood had scratches and dings from decades of use. One of the tuning pegs was slightly loose, but when Maya held it, she felt connected to something bigger than herself. Abuela Rosa had been the one who'd first taught her to play, not the formal lessons, not the music theory that Mr. Chen taught. Her grandmother had shown her the old songs, the ones from their family's roots in Mexico. She'd taught Maya how to feel the music, not just play it. "When your fingers touch these strings," Abuela used to say, "you're not just making noise, you're telling a story, you're sharing your heart." Maya lifted the guitar out carefully and sat down on a metal folding chair. She started tuning it, going through the familiar motions. E, A, D, G, B, E. The repetitive task calmed her slightly. Her fingers knew what to do here. This part was safe. From the stage, she heard applause. The magic act must be finishing up. Her pulse quickened again. Why had she chosen such a boring song? That morning, she'd practiced her set list one more time in her bedroom. She'd settled on a simple acoustic cover of a folk song that everyone knew. It was safe, easy, something she could play in her sleep. Mr. Chen had suggested she do one of her original pieces, or at least one of those more complex arrangements she'd been working on. But Maya had shaken her head firmly. "I just want to get through this," she'd told him. Now she wondered if boring was the same as safe. What if people were so uninterested they just waited for her to finish? What if she looked out at the audience and saw people on their phones, not even pretending to pay attention. Maybe that would be worse than messing up. At least if she made a mistake, people would be watching. She strummed a quiet chord, then another. The guitar was in tune. She had no more excuses to delay. A young boy, maybe 8 years old, came running past her. He was wearing a cape and carrying a wand. The magician. He looked thrilled, practically bouncing with excitement. "That was so cool," he said to someone, probably his parent, who was following behind him. Maya tried to remember the last time she'd felt that kind of pure joy about performing. Maybe never. She loved playing guitar, loved it more than almost anything. But that was in private. That was in her room with the door closed, or in the practice room with just Mr. Chen listening. That was when music was just for her. "Maya Rodriguez?" The volunteer with the clipboard was back. "You're up next. You can head to the stage entrance." Maya's mouth went dry. She nodded and stood up, slinging the guitar strap over her shoulder. The instrument suddenly felt heavier than usual. She followed the volunteer down the narrow hallway. With each step, the sounds from the auditorium grew louder. She could hear people talking, chairs scraping, someone laughing. Normal sounds. Why did they make her want to run? At the edge of the stage, she stopped. She could see the audience now, though they couldn't see her yet. The community center auditorium wasn't huge, maybe held 200 people. Tonight, it looked about half full. Families clustered together in groups. Some older couples sat near the front. A bunch of teenagers from her school were scattered in the back rows. The MC walked to the center of the stage. "All right, folks, let's give another round of applause for Bobby and his amazing magic show." More clapping. "Next up, we have a young musician. Please welcome Maya Rodriguez." This was it. No turning back now. Maya took a deep breath and stepped into the lights. The stage was smaller than it had seemed from backstage, just a raised platform with a microphone stand and a single stool. She walked to the stool, her legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. The applause faded. People were looking at her, waiting. She sat down on the stool and adjusted the microphone. It made a small feedback sound, and she winced. "Sorry," she mumbled. Her voice sounded tiny through the speakers. "Hi," she said, barely louder than a whisper. "I'm Maya. I'm going to play a song for you." She positioned her guitar, her fingers finding the familiar frets. She glanced out at the audience one more time. A woman in the third row was already checking her phone. 2 men near the side were having a whispered conversation. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. Maya closed her eyes for just a second. She thought of Abuela Rosa, of those afternoons in her grandmother's small living room, learning to play. "Don't be afraid of the music, mija," her grandmother had said. "The music is your friend." She opened her eyes and began to play. The first chord came out shaky. Maya's fingers felt stiff, like they'd forgotten everything they knew. She took a breath and started again, this time finding the rhythm she'd practiced 1,000 times in her bedroom. The song was one everyone knew, a gentle folk melody that had been popular for years, the kind of thing you'd hear at a coffee shop open mic night, safe, predictable, exactly what she'd planned. Maya began singing, her voice careful and controlled. She kept her eyes mostly on the guitar, watching her fingers move across the frets. Occasionally, she'd glance up at the audience, but never for too long. Looking at them made her throat tighten. The verse floated out into the auditorium. Soft and pretty, but nothing special. She was hitting all the right notes, keeping perfect time. This was fine. She just needed to get through 3 minutes, and then she could leave the stage and never do this again. But something felt wrong. Not with her playing, exactly. The notes were all correct. Her voice wasn't cracking or going off-key. Technically, everything was going according to plan. Yet with each passing second, Maya felt like she was disappearing, like she was fading into the background of her own performance. In the third row, the woman who'd been on her phone was still scrolling. The screen's blue light illuminated her face in the dimmed auditorium. She hadn't looked up once. Near the back, a teenage boy whispered something to his friend. They both snickered quietly. Maya tried not to let it bother her. They probably weren't even laughing at her. They were just bored. An older man in the front row stifled a yawn. Maya moved into the chorus, still playing it safe. Her fingers knew exactly where to go, which strings to press, how hard to strum. She'd memorized this arrangement down to the smallest detail, but memorization, she was realizing, wasn't the same as meaning. She could feel the audience's indifference like a physical thing. It wasn't that they disliked her performance. That might have been better, in a way. At least dislike was a reaction, a feeling, something. This was worse. This was polite tolerance. This was people waiting for her to finish so they could get to the next act or check their phones or chat with their neighbors. A chair creaked loudly somewhere in the middle section. The sound seemed to echo in the space between her guitar notes. Maya's voice stayed steady, but inside she was shrinking. This was her nightmare coming true, except it was somehow more disappointing than scary. She'd been so worried about messing up, about hitting a wrong note or forgetting the words. She hadn't considered that she might do everything right and still fail to connect with a single person. Mr. Chen was somewhere in the audience. She spotted him earlier, sitting near the side. She couldn't see him now with the stage lights in her eyes, but she knew he was there. He was probably disappointed. He'd been so excited for her to perform, so convinced she had something special to share. And here she was, proving him wrong with every forgettable note. The second verse began, more of the same. Pleasant, inoffensive music that asked nothing of the listener and gave nothing in return. Maya thought about her practice sessions at home. When she played there, it felt different. She'd lose track of time, her fingers moving across the strings like they were having a conversation with the guitar. Sometimes she'd experiment, adding little flourishes or changing the rhythm just to see how it sounded. Sometimes she'd play so loud her mom would knock on the door and ask her to turn it down. That was playing for herself, though. That was private. This right now was supposed to be different. This was supposed to be her showing people what she could do. Instead, she was showing them the smallest, safest version of herself, the version that wouldn't take risks, the version that colored inside the lines. A baby started fussing somewhere in the back. Its mother bounced it gently, making soft, shushing sounds. The baby's whimpers were almost as loud as Maya's singing. She was halfway through the song now. Just 90 more seconds and she'd be done. She could already imagine walking off stage, packing up her guitar, going home. Her mom would say she did great, like moms always do. Mr. Chen would tell her she played well, technically speaking, and that would be that. She'd have survived her first and last public performance. But surviving wasn't the same as living, was it? That's something Abuela Rosa used to say. Mija, don't just survive your life, live it. Maya's fingers continued their mechanical movement across the strings. Chorus again. Every note exactly as she'd planned it. Every strum perfectly measured. It was like she was playing someone else's version of the song, following a script that didn't belong to her. She thought about her grandmother's living room, the way afternoon sunlight would stream through the windows, making dust particles dance in the air. Abuela Rosa would sit in her favorite chair, the one with the worn armrest, and she'd play her guitar like it was an extension of her soul. She never played songs the way they were written on paper. She'd take a simple melody and twist it, reshape it, pour herself into it, until it became something entirely new. When you play, her grandmother had told her once, don't think about being perfect. Think about being honest. The guitar can tell when you're lying to it. Maya was lying right now. Every note was a lie. She was pretending to be smaller than she was, safer than she felt, simpler than the music living inside her chest. The bridge of the song approached. This was usually her favorite part, the moment where the melody shifted and opened up. But she was playing it the same way she'd played everything else. Careful, contained, completely forgettable. Two women in the fifth row were having a hushed conversation. One of them gestured with her hands while talking. Neither looked at the stage. Something tight and hot formed in Maya's chest. Was this really it? Was this all she was going to give? She'd been so terrified of failing that she'd guaranteed her own failure by refusing to try. She was failing in slow motion, in the most painfully boring way possible. The bridge ended. Final chorus coming up, then she'd be done. Mission accomplished. She'd have successfully wasted everyone's time, including her own. Her fingers moved toward the familiar chord progression, ready to finish this exactly as she'd started it. Safe, unremarkable, forgettable. But then something shifted inside her. Maybe it was the memory of her grandmother's voice. Maybe it was the frustration of watching people actively choose to ignore her. Maybe it was the realization that if this was going to be her only time on stage, she didn't want it to be a lie. The final chorus should have started. Her muscle memory knew exactly what to play next. But Maya's fingers hesitated over the strings. She thought about all those hours in her bedroom, playing the music that made her feel alive. The stuff she never shared with anyone except Mr. Chen. And even then, only sometimes. The complicated patterns her grandmother had taught her, the ones that made her fingers hurt at first. The percussive techniques that turned the guitar into a drum and a melody all at once. The way she could make the instrument sing or cry or shout. None of that was safe. None of that was predictable. But all of it was honest. The audience was still half paying attention, still waiting for her to finish. They had no idea she was at a crossroads. They had no idea that Maya was deciding, right there on that stage, whether to disappear completely or finally let them see her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The safe thing would be to just finish the song as planned. Get off stage. Go home. Forget this ever happened. But Abuela Rosa's voice echoed in her mind. Don't be afraid of the music, mija. The music is your friend. Maya's fingers found a different position on the fretboard, not the chord progression she'd practiced. Something else, something that scared her and thrilled her at the same time. She closed her eyes, took a breath that felt like jumping off a cliff, and let her fingers move where they wanted to go. The first unexpected note rang out through the auditorium, clear and sharp. It didn't belong in the song Maya had been playing. It shouldn't have been there at all. But there it was, hanging in the air like a question mark. Maya's eyes were closed now. She couldn't watch the audience anymore, couldn't see their bored faces or their glowing phone screens. If she was going to do this, really do this, she needed to shut out everything except the guitar and the music flowing through her fingertips. Her right hand began moving differently. Instead of the gentle strumming she'd been doing, her fingers started dancing across the strings with a speed and precision that came from somewhere deep in her muscle memory. This was the technique Abuela Rosa had spent hours teaching her. Flamenco patterns that turned the guitar into something alive and breathing. The melody shifted, twisted, became something entirely new. The safe folk song disappeared, replaced by something raw and urgent. Maya's fingers flew across the fretboard, hitting notes she'd been too scared to play a minute ago. Complex progressions that required her full concentration, runs that made her fingers stretch and leap across the strings. The woman in the third row looked up from her phone. Maya didn't see it. Her eyes were still closed, her whole body swaying slightly with the rhythm. She was somewhere else now, somewhere beyond the stage and the lights and the fear. She was in her grandmother's living room. She was in her bedroom at midnight. She was in every moment she'd ever played guitar just for the pure joy of it. Her left hand moved up the neck of the guitar, finding harmonics that rang out like bells. She'd practiced this countless times alone, but never in front of anyone. It was too complicated, too risky. One wrong finger placement and the whole thing would fall apart. But right now, with her eyes closed and her heart pounding, Maya didn't care about the risk. The teenage boys in the back row stopped whispering. The music built, layer upon layer. Maya added percussion, tapping the body of the guitar with her palm while her fingers continued to fly across the strings. Rhythm and melody at the same time, turning one instrument into an entire band. This was the magic her grandmother had shown her, the secret that most people never learned. The guitar wasn't just for pretty chords. It could drum, it could sing, it could shout. And right now, Maya's guitar was shouting. She felt heat rising in her chest, felt something breaking free that had been locked away for too long. Every fear she'd carried onto that stage was burning away, replaced by pure electric energy. Her fingers knew what to do. They'd always known. She'd just been too afraid to let them. The old man, who'd been yawning, sat up straighter in his seat. Maya's voice came back, but it wasn't the careful, controlled sound from before. This was different. This came from her gut, from her soul, from the same place the guitar playing came from. She sang in a mix of English and Spanish, words her grandmother had taught her, phrases that meant more than their translation. Her voice soared and dipped, matching the wild complexity of the guitar. The melody twisted again, taking an unexpected turn. Maya was improvising now, not following any arrangement she'd practiced. She was following her instincts, trusting her fingers to find the right notes. And somehow, impossibly, they did. Every time. A woman near the aisle leaned forward, her eyes wide. The guitar sang under Maya's hands. She moved through techniques she'd learned over years, weaving them together into something that was entirely her own. Spanish influences from her grandmother, modern finger-picking she'd taught herself from videos, jazz chords Mr. Chen had shown her. All of it melted together into a sound that was uniquely Maya's. She didn't sound like anyone else. She didn't sound like the recording of the folk song. She didn't sound safe or predictable or forgettable. She sounded like herself, finally, completely. The conversations in the audience had stopped. The whispers had faded. Even the baby had gone quiet. Maya built toward something, though she didn't know what yet. The music was taking her somewhere, and all she could do was follow. Her fingers moved faster, the patterns becoming more intricate. She added flourishes that seemed impossible, notes that shouldn't fit, but somehow created perfect dissonance before resolving into something beautiful. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her fingers were starting to ache, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't. The music had its own momentum now, its own life. She was just the channel it was flowing through. In the audience, people were putting their phones away, turning their full attention to the stage, watching this girl who'd seemed so nervous and ordinary transform into something completely unexpected. Maya's voice grew stronger, more confident. She wasn't thinking about hitting the right notes anymore. She wasn't worried about what people thought. She was just feeling, just expressing everything she'd kept bottled up inside. Every frustration, every joy, every moment of doubt and hope and fear. It all came pouring out through her fingers and her voice. The guitar seemed to glow under her hands, though that might have just been the stage lights. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe it was the years of love and music that had soaked into its wood. Her grandmother's hands and now Maya's, generations of sound and soul. She moved through a series of rapid-fire chord changes that would have seemed impossible moments ago, but her fingers found each position perfectly, muscle memory taking over completely. This was what happened when you stopped trying to control everything and just let the music lead. A man in the middle section wiped his eyes. The music had found something in him, touched some emotion he didn't know he was carrying. Maya didn't see him. She was still lost in the performance, still following wherever the song wanted to go. And right now, It wanted to climb higher. She moved up the neck of the guitar, finding notes in the upper register that rang out clear and bright. Her voice followed, reaching for something beyond her normal range. She could feel the audience now, feel their attention like a warm light. It wasn't scary anymore. It was energizing. They were with her, riding the wave of music, feeling what she felt. The teenage girl who'd been slouching in her seat was now sitting on the edge of it, leaning forward, completely absorbed. Maya's playing became more percussive, her palms striking the guitar body in complex rhythms, while her fingers continued to find melody. The instrument became a drum kit and a symphony at once. Sound filled every corner of the auditorium, bouncing off the walls, impossible to ignore or tune out. This was what Mr. Chen had heard in the practice room. This was what he'd wanted everyone else to hear. Not the safe version, not the careful performance. This, the real Maya. The one who could take a simple instrument and make it speak in languages beyond words. Her grandmother's words came back to her, floating through her mind even as her hands moved across the strings. When your fingers touch these strings, you're not just making noise, you're telling a story, you're sharing your heart. Maya was sharing her heart now, every beat of it, every wild, scared, brave, beautiful piece of it. The music built toward a peak, Maya's fingers moving faster than they'd ever moved before. She was playing at the very edge of her ability, right on the line between control and chaos. One wrong move and everything would fall apart. But she didn't make wrong moves. Not now. Not when she was finally being honest. Her voice rose to match the intensity of the guitar, powerful and clear and completely unafraid. This wasn't the girl who'd walked onto the stage minutes ago. This was someone else entirely. Someone who'd been hiding inside Maya all along, waiting for permission to emerge. The final section approached. Maya could feel it coming, could feel the music pulling toward its conclusion, but she wasn't ready for it to end. Not yet. So she extended it, improvising a bridge that hadn't existed before, taking the audience on one more journey before bringing them home. Every person in that auditorium was watching her now, every single one. The phones were away. The conversations were over. The baby was quiet in its mother's arms. There was only Maya and her guitar, and this impossible, beautiful sound filling the space between them all. She opened her eyes for the first time since she deviated from her planned performance. The lights were still bright, but she could see faces in the audience now, and what she saw made her heart skip. They weren't bored. They weren't checking their phones. They weren't waiting for her to finish. They were captivated. Maya saw their faces clearly now. The woman who'd been on her phone was staring with her mouth slightly open. The teenage boys in the back weren't smirking anymore. They looked stunned, like they'd just witnessed something they couldn't quite believe. The older man in the front row had tears running down his cheeks. She didn't understand what was happening at first. Her fingers were still moving across the strings, still pulling music from the guitar like she was pulling water from a well. But seeing their faces, seeing the way everyone was locked onto her, made something click inside her chest. They were hearing her, really hearing her. The music swelled one more time, Maya's voice climbing with it. She'd never sung this loudly, this openly before. In her bedroom, she'd always kept it down, worried about disturbing her mom or the neighbors. But here, now, she let everything out. Her voice filled the auditorium, bouncing off the walls, mixing with the sound of the guitar until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. She could see Mr. Chen now, sitting about halfway back on the left side. He was standing, actually standing, though the song wasn't over yet. His hands were clasped together near his chest, and even from the stage, Maya could see the huge smile on his face. This was what he'd heard in the practice room. This was what he'd known she was capable of. The final chord approached. Maya could feel it coming, could feel the music pulling toward its natural conclusion. She didn't want it to end. For these few minutes, she'd felt more alive than she'd ever felt, more herself. But all songs have endings, even the best ones. Her fingers found the last position on the fretboard. She let the chord ring out, sustaining it longer than seemed possible. The note hung in the air like a bird hovering before landing. She added vibrato, making the sound shimmer and pulse. The whole auditorium seemed to hold its breath with her. Then, slowly, carefully, she let the sound fade. Her fingers lifted from the strings, and the final note dissolved into silence. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence felt enormous after all that music. Maya sat frozen on the stool, her heart hammering, her fingers still positioned over the strings. Had she gone too far? Had it been too much? Too weird? Too different from what they'd expected? The silence stretched. 1 second, 2 seconds. Maya's stomach dropped. Then someone started clapping. Not polite applause, not the kind of scattered clapping she'd heard when she first walked on stage. This was thunderous. This was explosive. The sound hit her like a physical force, and then everyone was clapping. The entire auditorium erupted at once. People weren't just sitting in their seats anymore. They were standing. All of them. A standing ovation. And it was getting louder with every second. Maya blinked, not quite believing what she was seeing. The woman who'd been on her phone was on her feet, clapping so hard it must have hurt her hands. The teenage boys were whistling, their earlier boredom completely forgotten. The older man was still crying, but now he was smiling through the tears, applauding with everyone else. Someone near the front shouted, "Yes!" Another person whistled. A woman was wiping her eyes while clapping. A father hoisted his young daughter onto his shoulders so she could see better, both of them applauding. Maya stood up slowly, still holding her guitar. Her legs felt shaky. Was this really happening? People were cheering now, not just clapping. The sound was almost as loud as her playing had been. She looked for her mom and found her in the 4th row. Her mother had both hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. When their eyes met, her mom lowered her hands and mouthed, "I love you." Then she started clapping even harder, if that was possible. Mr. Chen was beaming, clapping over his head like he was at a rock concert. Some of the other students from school were going crazy, jumping up and down while they applauded. Even the judges, 3 serious-looking people sitting at a table near the front, were on their feet. One of them, a woman with gray hair and glasses, had her hand over her heart. Maya didn't know what to do. She'd never imagined this scenario, never prepared for it. She'd only prepared for 2 possibilities, messing up completely or getting through it unremarkably. This wasn't either of those things. She did a small, awkward bow. The applause got even louder, which didn't seem possible. Someone shouted, "Encore!" and others picked up the chant, "Encore! Encore!" Maya felt tears prickling at her own eyes now, not from sadness or fear, but from something else entirely, something overwhelming and huge that she didn't have words for. People were actually cheering for her, for the real her, the one she'd been too scared to show anyone. She managed a small wave, then walked off the stage on shaky legs. The applause followed her into the wings. Even backstage, she could hear it continuing, loud and enthusiastic. The volunteer with the clipboard stood there looking impressed. "Girl, that was incredible," she said. "I've been running this showcase for 5 years, and I've never seen anything like that." Maya nodded, not trusting her voice to work. She made her way to a folding chair and sat down heavily, clutching her guitar. Her hands were trembling. Her whole body was trembling. The applause finally started to fade as the MC returned to the stage and asked people to settle down for the next performer. But Maya could still hear whispers, excited conversations, people talking about what they'd just witnessed. A few minutes later, Mr. Chen found her backstage. He didn't say anything at first, just pulled her into a tight hug. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "That's what I heard," he said. That's what I knew was in you. Maya, do you understand what you just did? She shook her head. She didn't understand. Not really. She just played guitar the way she played it when no one was watching. Except people had been watching, and apparently it had meant something to them. You connected, Mr. Chen said. Real connection, real artistry. That's rare, Maya, that's special. More people started appearing backstage. The gray-haired judge found her and introduced herself as Patricia, a music teacher at the local college. I need your contact information, she said, pulling out her phone. We have scholarship opportunities for young musicians with raw talent, and honey, what you have goes beyond talent. That's gift. A man in his 30s approached next. He was dressed more formally than most people there, wearing a button-down shirt and nice jeans. He handed Maya a business card. I'm David Reyes. I run a small recording studio downtown, and I work with young artists. I recorded your performance on my phone. Hope that's okay. I couldn't help it. Would you be interested in talking about recording some of your music? Maya stared at the business card like it might disappear. You want to record me? I want to help you share what you have with more people, he said. That kind of authentic talent, that's not something you can manufacture or teach. You have something real. Her mom found her next, pushing through the small crowd that had formed. She wrapped Maya in a hug so tight it was hard to breathe. Mija, that was beautiful. Your abuela would have been so proud. She would have loved every second of that. That's when Maya really started crying. Not sad tears, but the kind that come when emotions get too big to hold inside anymore. Her grandmother had taught her those techniques, had believed in her music when Maya barely believed in herself. And somehow, for those few minutes on stage, it had felt like Abuela Rosa was right there with her, guiding her fingers across the strings. I was so scared, Maya admitted, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. I know, baby, but you did it anyway. That's what courage looks like. The teenage girl who'd been sitting on the edge of her seat appeared, looking shy. Excuse me? I just wanted to say that was amazing, like, actually life-changing amazing. I've been thinking about quitting piano lessons because I felt like I wasn't good enough, but watching you just made me want to practice more. Thank you. Maya wiped her eyes. You should definitely keep playing, she said, and meant it. More people wanted to talk to her, parents saying their kids were inspired, other performers from the showcase congratulating her, a local newspaper reporter asking if she'd answer a few questions. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. Through it all, Maya kept thinking about those first few minutes on stage. When she'd been playing it safe, being boring, hiding herself, she'd been so focused on not failing that she'd guaranteed she wouldn't succeed either. It was only when she'd stopped protecting herself, stopped trying to be small and acceptable, that the real magic had happened. The volunteer with the clipboard appeared again. Maya, you won. Best performance of the night, unanimous decision from the judges. There's a trophy and everything. Maya laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. A few hours ago, she'd been ready to back out completely. Now she was holding a business card from a music producer and being told she'd won. Her mom squeezed her hand. What happens now? She asked. Maya looked down at her grandmother's guitar, at the worn wood and scratched finish. She thought about all the music still inside her, all the songs she'd been too scared to share. Now, Maya said slowly, a smile spreading across her face. I guess I figure out what comes next. Maya woke up the next morning to 73 text messages. Her phone had been buzzing all night, but she'd been too exhausted to check it. Now, sitting in bed with her hair still messy from sleep, she scrolled through message after message from people she barely knew. OMG, you were amazing last night. Why didn't you tell me you could play like that? My mom can't stop talking about your performance. Then she saw a message from her friend Christina with a link and 3 flame emojis. "Girl, you're going viral." Maya clicked the link with shaky fingers. It opened to a video on social media. The title read, "Shy Teen's Guitar Performance Will Give You Chills." The view count made her stomach drop. 40,000 views in less than 12 hours. She pressed play. There she was on stage, looking nervous at the beginning, playing that safe, boring version of the folk song. Then the moment came. The shift. When her playing transformed into something else entirely. Watching it from the outside was strange. She barely recognized herself in those final minutes, the way she moved, the intensity on her face. The comments section was flooded. This made me cry. That transition at 1:45 is insane. Who is this girl? She needs a record deal. I've watched this 10 times already and I still get goosebumps. Maya set her phone down, her heart racing. This was real. This was actually happening. David Reyes, the music producer who'd given her his card, must have posted the video he'd recorded. She found his profile and saw he'd written, "Sometimes you witness real artistry in the most unexpected places. This young woman reminded me why I got into music in the first place." By the time Maya got to school on Monday, everything had changed. People she'd never spoken to knew her name. They stopped her in the hallway, wanting to talk about the performance. Some asked for videos or photos. Others just wanted to tell her how much the music had meant to them. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. But the real change came a week later when David called her. He'd been serious about the recording offer. He wanted to help her create an EP, a short collection of songs. "Nothing fancy," he said. "Just you and your guitar the way it should be. Let people hear what you actually sound like, not some overproduced version." Maya's mom had insisted on coming to the first meeting at his studio. She wasn't letting her 17-year-old daughter sign anything without reading every word. But David was genuine. He showed them his previous work, introduced them to other young artists he'd helped, explained exactly what the process would look like. "I'm not trying to change you," he said to Maya. "I'm just trying to give you a platform. The music is already there. You proved that on stage." Over the next 3 months, Maya spent her weekends at the studio. She recorded 5 songs, a mix of original pieces and reimagined covers. Each one showcased different aspects of her playing, different techniques her grandmother had taught her. David was right. He didn't try to change her sound. He just captured it. The EP launched on streaming platforms in January. Maya didn't expect much. Maybe her friends and family would listen. Maybe a few people from the talent show would download it out of curiosity. Within a week, it had 300,000 streams. Within a month, it had crossed 2 million. Music blogs started writing about her. Small venues reached out asking if she'd perform. A guitar company sent her a new instrument, hoping she'd use it in her videos. It was surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. But the opportunity that meant the most came from an unexpected source. The community center where she'd performed reached out with a proposal. They'd received funding for an after-school music program, and they wanted Maya to help teach it. "You inspired a lot of young people that night," the director said. "Kids who didn't think they had anything special to offer. We'd love for you to work with them." Maya said yes immediately. The program started in February. 15 kids showed up the first day, ranging from 9 years old to 16. Most came from the same kind of neighborhood Maya had grown up in. Families that worked hard but didn't have money for expensive music lessons or fancy instruments. Maya taught them what Abuela Rosa had taught her, not just the technical skills, though that was part of it. She taught them that music wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty, about finding your own voice and having the courage to use it. "Don't try to sound like me or anyone else," she told them during the 3rd session. "Figure out what sounds like you. That's the only thing that matters." One student, a quiet 12-year-old named Luis, reminded her of herself. He barely spoke, kept his eyes down, played hesitantly like he was afraid of taking up too much space. Maya worked with him privately after class one day. "You're holding back," she said gently. "I can hear it. You're playing what you think you should play instead of what you want to play." Luis looked at his shoes. "What if it's not good?" "What if it is?" Maya countered. "You'll never know unless you try." The next week, Luis played a piece he'd written himself. It was rough and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. When he finished, the other kids erupted in applause. Maya saw the same transformation in his face that she'd felt on that stage months ago. The moment when you realize you have something worth sharing. By spring, the video of Maya's original performance had been viewed over 5 million times. She'd been featured in local news segments, interviewed on podcasts, even invited to perform at a regional music festival. Record labels had reached out, though she was taking her time deciding what she wanted to do. Her mom kept newspaper clippings in a folder. Mr. Chen had framed a photo from the talent show and hung it in his classroom. Christina joked that she needed to charge people for access to Maya's childhood stories now that she was famous. But Maya didn't feel famous. She felt like herself, just a bigger, braver version. She still practiced in her bedroom with her grandmother's guitar. She still got nervous before performances, though the nervousness felt different now. Less like fear of failure and more like excitement about possibility. One evening in late April, Maya sat in her bedroom working on a new song. Her mom knocked on the door and poked her head in. "There's someone here to see you," she said, smiling mysteriously. Maya followed her to the living room. Patricia, the gray-haired judge from the talent show, stood there with a folder in her hands. "I hope it's okay that I stopped by," Patricia said. "I wanted to deliver this in person." She handed Maya the folder. Inside was a letter from the State University's music program, a full scholarship offer, 4 years, everything covered. "You earned this," Patricia said. "Not because of the viral video or the EP, though those didn't hurt. You earned this because you have genuine talent and the kind of dedication we look for. The committee watched your performance and saw something rare, a young artist who's already found her voice." After Patricia left, Maya sat on the couch holding the letter. Her mom sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders. "Abuela Rosa would be so proud," her mom said softly. "I was so scared that night," Maya admitted. "I almost played it safe the whole time. Almost didn't let anyone see the real me. But you did. That's what matters." Maya thought about that moment on stage, the split second when she'd decided to stop hiding, to stop making herself smaller and safer and more acceptable. Everything good that had happened since came from that single choice. The scholarship, the recording opportunity, the chance to teach other kids, all of it traced back to those few minutes when she'd been brave enough to be authentic. The next Saturday, Maya brought her guitar to the community center for the music program. The kids were already there, tuning instruments and chattering excitedly. Luis waved from across the room, holding a guitar that David had donated to the program. "Miss Maya," one of the younger students called out, "can you teach us that fast part from your video? The one where your fingers go crazy?" Maya laughed. "Maybe. But first, I want you to show me what you've been working on." She listened as each student played something they'd practiced. Some were polished, some were rough, but all of them were trying. All of them were putting themselves out there, being vulnerable enough to share their music. When they finished, Maya picked up her guitar. "I want to tell you something," she said. "When I performed at the talent show, I started by playing the safest, most boring version of a song you can imagine. I was so afraid of messing up that I almost guaranteed I wouldn't do anything special." The kids listened intently. "But then I realized something. The only real failure is not being yourself. So I stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be honest. And that made all the difference." She played for them then, not a lesson or a demonstration, just music. The kind that came from somewhere deep and real, the kind her grandmother had taught her to play. When she finished, Luis raised his hand. "Do you still get nervous?" "Every time," Maya admitted. "But I've learned that being nervous means you care. It means what you're doing matters, and that's okay." Later that night, Maya posted a new video online. Just her in her bedroom with her grandmother's guitar, playing a song she'd written. No fancy production, no perfect lighting, just honest music. The caption read, "A few months ago, I almost quit before I started. I almost let fear win. But I learned something important that night on stage. You don't find your courage by waiting until you're not scared anymore. You find it by deciding that being real matters more than being perfect. Don't hide your light. The world needs what you have to offer, exactly as you are." Within minutes, comments started appearing. People sharing their own stories of fear and courage. Young musicians posting their own videos inspired to stop hiding. Teachers tagging their students who needed to see the message. Maya smiled and set her phone aside. She picked up her guitar and started playing, not for an audience or a video or anything else. Just for herself, for the pure joy of making music. Outside her window, the evening sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside, Maya's fingers moved across the strings, pulling melodies from the old guitar like her grandmother had taught her. And somewhere in those notes was a simple truth she'd carry forever. The music had always been inside her. She just needed one moment of courage to let it out.